I think often about my grandmother, who was a chambermaid for the Hartford Electric Light Company. Not more than a 7th or 8th grade education, but put 3 children through school. So to come back as the University of Hartford president in a university that carries the city of Hartford's name, the only thing that makes my story possible is the promise of higher education.
Thanks for joining us on the CBIA BizCast, powered by Google. I'm Scott Bolio, filling in for Amanda Marlowe. And today we're thrilled to be joined by Lawrence Ward, president of the University of Hartford. Larry, thanks so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
This is great. You're coming up on kind of a milestone. You're marking your first year soon as president of the University of Hartford, and you got some big plans for the university, and we're going to get into that as we go.
Yeah.
And a lot of that has to do with fostering new partnerships and deeper partnerships with the business community, both just, again, the greater Hartford area, but all over the state, really, right?
Yeah.
But we want to, before we get into all that, we want to learn more about you and a little bit about your background. You're no stranger to Connecticut.
I am no stranger to Connecticut. So thanks so much for having me and for the opportunity to feature the university. Yeah, I grew up in Vernon, Connecticut. Graduated from Rockville High School and was a UConn product for my undergraduate degree. My family has been in Hartford proper since the 1940s. Both my parents came under different circumstances as young folk, and so grew up here. Have many family members here, and have deep roots here in the area. So Connecticut is definitely home for me.
What was it about education that drew you to being in education and higher education specifically?
Yeah, it's a really good question. My mother was started her career as a social studies teacher, high school social studies teacher. First out at Connard in West Hartford, and then at Rockville High before moving into a career in insurance in Hartford. So educator, teacher was the very first profession that I saw up close.
Yeah.
And, we covet what we first see.
Sure.
And so watching my mother teach, I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And so I think the seeds for being an educator were first planted as a young child.
Yeah. I grew up in a family of educators myself. Both my parents were teachers. And, I can speak from personal experience of just, the dedication and the passion that goes into being a teacher. So there's something kind of noble about the profession in and of itself. Yeah, and
I also married a school teacher as well. So my admiration for teachers is deep.
There is, I will say though, there is, teaching and then, running a university are obviously related, but two pretty different things. How, where does the journey take you after graduating from UConn?
So I studied business at UConn. I started my career at Aetna, actually, in sales and marketing. What was then called Group School, which was the premier training program for Aetna's new salespeople. And so one of the things I liked about that is that I knew that I would, you go through a training course at the old Aetna Institute on Farmington Avenue. You go through a 10-week training course, and I knew that I wouldn't be assigned to a Connecticut office. So it guaranteed that I was going to leave Connecticut for some period of time, and that brought me to Washington, D.C., and I spent 4 years at Aetna. I will tell you, at UConn, a lot of my mentors, the director of the Cultural Center, African American Cultural Center, the vice president for student affairs, Harry Hartley, who was the president of UConn at the time, were mentors. And so my very first mentors were senior administrators on a college campus. So again, more academic administration seeds being planted, including that of a university president. Yeah. So after Aetna, I decided that I would get a master's degree. I went to University of Michigan.
Okay.
Worked while I was in graduate school for the vice president of student affairs. And parenthetically, met a guy by the name of Walt Harrison. Walt Harrison is the president emeritus of the University of Hartford.
Okay.
Walt adopted me while he was a vice president, adopted me professionally while he was a vice president at Michigan. And again, mentored me, took me under his wing. 2 years later, he came to Hartford as president and served for 17 years. So I'd kept a very close relationship with Walt, and obviously kept a very close eye on the University of Hartford. Yeah. So along the way, my career brought me back to Washington, D.C. as a consultant for an organizational training company, then ultimately to American University for 13 years as a director, as an assistant dean, and ultimately as an associate dean.
So you have that relationship with your mentor at the University of Hartford. Is that what initially kind of planted the seed or kind of drew you to the University of Hartford? Or what was it about UHart that kind of brought you back?
Yeah, I actually, it's funny, I wasn't originally eyeing the University of Hartford. By that point, I'm at Babson College. I'd had a 10-year run at Babson College as a vice president and a dean there. I felt as though I was prepared to pursue a presidency, and had my eye on a couple of schools, including one other, actually Connecticut College in New London. But then I found that the University of Hartford position was opening, and the connections just started to build from there, and the interest as well.
What was it about the university that you think kind of sold you on it?
I think its geography was really important, really the ability to come home.
Yeah.
The strength of the academic disciplines, the diversity of those disciplines, of the schools and colleges, the diversity of the student body, the interest in teaching, focus on teaching, the connections to local employers. I spent 13 years at an American university. Part of the mission was as a private institution that serves the public interest. University of Hartford has a very similar mantra as a public university, a private university that serves or advances the public good. I grew up steeped in that ethos, and that was really attractive to me.
That's important. Yeah. That's great. There's something about Connecticut and, being as small as we are, we talk about it a lot at CBIA, of kind of that 1 degree of separation of being able to connect with people.
It's not a big metropolis, right? Yeah. But it's a connected one.
Yeah.
And so it's funny, I'm sitting there in one of my first cabinet meetings, and we're talking about our insurance, employee insurance, and we've just gotten our rates back, and my CFO says, well, we got a break on our rates that the lead salesperson, or the guy who runs the division for Aetna, went to high school with you. Right?
There you go, yeah.
Shout out Spence Papke. So that was very, very cool.
Sometimes a matter of who you know, right? Yeah.
Well, yeah, and we just did a career fair on campus for public administration jobs in the state of Connecticut. And all of the agency heads and representatives came. It was a great career fair, including the commissioner, who I also went to high school with. So that's been pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
You talked a little bit about, your family kind of being from having roots in Hartford, and you're coming from a family of teachers, and, what does it mean to you to come back as a president of a university, and to have that, have reached that part of your career when your family, is from here?
It's really special. I think often about my grandmother, my mother's mother, who was a chambermaid for the Hartford Electric Light Company, right? This is the predecessor to Eversource.
Yeah.
She had not more than a 7th or 8th grade education, but put 3 children through school, including my mother. And the pride that she had in the work, even though she worked in bathrooms and cleaned up after others, one of her favorite possessions was these years of service pins. She had a 15, a 10, 20 years. And my mother gave them to me many years ago, and I had them turned into cufflinks.
Oh, wow.
And I wore those cufflinks at my inauguration. So to come back as the University of Hartford president in a university that carries the city of Hartford's name, where my grandmother worked, and the only thing that makes my story possible and that of my family is the promise of higher education. So it's really important. Yeah. It's very personal, and it is a tremendous honor to come back as president.
That's quite a family legacy that you're kind of building upon, and kind of a big responsibility too of carrying that on. Yeah. All right, so you're home now. We gotta do something with it, right? So let's talk about let's talk about what's going on at UHart. How has the first year been? I mean, you took over at a time that wasn't without challenges.
For sure.
And you've been, upfront about kind of facing those. Talk a little bit about that for, the first few months in this first year.
Yeah. Yeah, it's they tell you during the selection process, there's the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Reality is, during the search and selection process, you get a little bit of the whole truth. But once you sit in the seat, you get nothing but the truth. So I will say a couple of things. I have been really heartened by the university community's response to me and my leadership. I think one of the things that the university was hungry for and really optimistic about was a president who would be present and engaged and accessible. And I really prided myself on these first 9 months on doing exactly that and understanding the community and the individuals who make up the community. And they have responded well to my leadership, including, adopting the language that I use, like a reimagining excellence and anticipating success, not failure, and turning things on its side and looking at it from a new perspective.
It really is a little bit about changing the way that you're looking at things and kind of reframing the way that you're thinking about it.
Well, 100%. And it's both from a cultural perspective, right? So it's, I don't know if turnaround is too strong, because there's a really strong bones at the university, right? But we certainly need to go confidently into some new directions. And part of that is cultural. The last handful of years have been difficult. COVID, which impacted all of us in different ways. The at the time, very controversial decision to move from Division I to Division III athletics, which led to just a lot of consternation, hard feelings, misunderstandings, and then just leadership challenges, right? And those dynamics stacked on top of each other were really, really hard for our university, both financially and culturally. Yeah. And so coming in, I recognize that I have a challenge of rebuilding confidence in its institution and rebuilding confidence in ourselves organizationally. That's a cultural challenge. And the university community has responded really well to that. On the financial side, there's some strong headwinds in higher ed. So we're strengthening enrollment, our retention, our persistence efforts, and frankly, our connection with alumni and donor community and also the greater Hartford community as well. So all of those are important parts of reimagining our business model.
Yeah. So let's talk, we mentioned at the beginning, you've got some big plans, kind of moving forward. So what are some of your goals and objectives for the university to kind of keep that reimagining and that rebuilding process going forward?
Yeah. So I think a big part of it is to make the University of Hartford a preferred destination for students and families. When I think about the depth of academic disciplines that we have, and I think about programs like robotics and nursing and health professions, the strength of our business school, sports management, and business analytics. I mean, we've got some really strong market-facing, in-demand programs, and we need to match that with a really high-quality, student-focused experience on campus, that living, learning experience, and that relentless commitment to student success. That's first and foremost. Yeah. I talked about continuing to evolve the University of Hartford, make it a stronger people organization, for the folks, our faculty and staff that make the University of Hartford their professional home, right?
Yeah.
Is to be an employer of choice, to really invest in the human infrastructure. Obviously, that's compensation, it's professional development, it's creating an environment where people feel as though they have an opportunity to develop and to grow and to feel good about that. Third is really about demonstrating leadership in the greater Hartford community, right? And this is really, really important to me and really a big part of our history. I mentioned being the University of Hartford, right? And the importance of having demonstrable evidence of our engagement academically, educationally, and economically in this region and in this state. That's with local employers, that's with civic organizations, that's with elected leaders, that we are co-conspirators at the table helping to develop this area. So success for the region will mean success for the University of Hartford, increase our brand, grow attention for.
Yeah. And you guys have done, I think a lot of that has already started. That work has started maybe even before you got there, but I think ramping up is, and a big part of that, and you've mentioned it a couple of times, is, engaging with local employers.
Yeah.
There's no, we're not making headlines by saying that there's a workforce challenge in the state, and part of that is how do you help partner with any organizations, universities, employers to kind of find those programs that's going to grow the workforce. So can you talk a little bit about, how is UHart kind of taking that on of not just having, it's not just higher education, but it's higher education that's preparing students for what's happening once they get out of school.
Preparing them for a complex and pluralistic world, right?
Yeah.
And to add value to that. I'll give you a couple examples. I was meeting with Gina Calder. Gina Calder, relatively new president of Hartford Healthcare's Central Region.
Okay.
And we were talking about our rad tech program, radiation technology program, right? All the imaging and so on and so forth. And it's a burgeoning program. We're really excited about it. And we're kind of out of space and need more space and more equipment. And she says, well, I got space and equipment. What I don't have are technicians. And, it is so important to the development of our workforce. I mean, we could hire just about every graduate that you could produce. So, you take this. So the goal is to take what the University of Hartford can bring to the table and match that with, say, what Hartford Healthcare can bring to the table. And you find commonalities, right? And so working together, rather than me trying to beat my head into a wall saying, how do I find more space and afford more equipment? It's how do I find the right industry partner so that we have shared outcomes? And so that together we can produce something that's much larger and more interesting than we could on our own. Now, I don't mean to suggest that Hartford Healthcare will be in trouble without the University of Hartford. They're doing just fine. Yeah. Shout out Jeff Flax.
But it's a mutually beneficial relationship. So
there you go.
What is it like, what does an ideal partnership look like to you? How is it like, how have those efforts been going so far?
Yeah, they've been going really well. We'll take, Stanley Black & Decker, for example. Their CEO is also chair of our Board of Regents. Don Allen has been incredibly generous in investing in our Career Center, but also in creating $3 million in scholarships to identify talented students here in the greater Hartford area, and to build a pipeline not only to the University of Hartford, but to use the University of Hartford as a pipeline for talent into Stanley Black & Decker. That's what a fruitful partnership looks like.
Yeah,
right?
and it really is. It's kind of hitting all those levels of, it starts from kind of the ground up of we need the students to learn the skills and the skills to fill the jobs, and that all kind of goes back to the old rising tide lifts all boats.
It's true. We've got two magnet schools on our campus. We have a university high school for science and engineering. We have a magnet elementary school. We've got a wonderful school of education, nursing, and health professions. So as we look at the pipeline for teachers, as we look at the pipeline for, say, women in STEM, that's an incredible area for the University of Hartford to partner with local school systems to help produce teachers, to produce mentors. We've got a program at a real local level, the Upper Albany Main Street initiative. Mostly small, minority-owned businesses along the north end of Albany Avenue, partnered with our business school and our business school students to do help them with technology and software and research and building business plans, right? So that's the University of Hartford using one of our assets, our students and our faculty, to help small businesses find greater levels of success. So whether we're talking about Fortune 500 multinational corporations or small businesses, a hair salon, a Jamaican bakery, we feel as though we have a responsibility as the University of Hartford to be supportive.
Yeah, you kind of view back to it. It goes back to being the University of Hartford and having that anchor, being that anchor for the community of Hartford.
And that's not a me thing. That's a we thing, right? That's not Larry Ward. That's in the history of the university. I think it's really important for a new president, or really any president, not to bend the university along my arc, but to help bend myself along the arc of the university.
What's the long-term vision? Where do what's the vision for where you want to see the university?
Yeah. Great question. So I'll say a couple things. The first is around financial stability and sustainability. We've got to have a business model that is sustainable. That means as a tuition-dependent institution, we've got to have a flow of students at the undergraduate and graduate level that is predictable and that is sustainable. So, for example, next year we'll be fully have achieved our transition to Division III athletics. That represents a new business model. Where I see ourselves in 3 to 5 years is competing successfully for national championships and have a strong pipeline of Division III athletes who are enrolled on our campus. When I think about our degree programs in our schools and colleges, that we've got in each school 2 or 3 signature programs that are not just drawing regionally, but drawing students nationally, that we have cracked rankings and that we are considered a top 50 in each of these signature programs. I think that's really, really important for driving enrollment and driving revenue. And finally, I think that we will have much greater engagement from our alumni and our donor community, that we've got sustainable investment and philanthropy, that we will have been sufficiently along in a major capital campaign that is investing in the living and learning environment on campus, and fruitful partnerships in the Greater Hartford region, in the state, and in New England with major employers. So that's the vision. That's the future vision of the university. But it's all built around a sustainable financial model.
That's great. As we kind of start to close out our episodes, we like to end with a little bit of reflection. I want to go back to something that you brought up at the beginning of our conversation. You talked a lot about the mentors that you had along the way, that really, helped guide you to where you are. How important is that, do you think, and how do you, as the University of Hartford president, help foster mentorships like that for your students, for the community, for businesses?
I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned along the way is that leadership isn't about me. It's about the people that I lead and the communities that I serve. So I just had a doctoral student on campus a few weeks ago who's writing a dissertation about presidents of color at predominantly white institutions. And he wanted to, I was one of his interview subjects, and he wanted just to come and shadow me and spend a day with me. And so I invited him to campus, and, he sat in on my meetings, including, with permissions and one-on-ones that we had with the senior staff. I was at an industry conference a few weeks ago, talking about my transition from being a chief student affairs officer, as I was at Babson, to the University of Hartford as president. And there's a lot of folks in the audience looking to become a college or a university president. So making myself available, sharing my truth in an authentic and a genuine way, I hope gives others license to discover more of their own truth, to be a beacon of hope and inspiration. I believe that to whom much is given, much is required. And that includes my time and my example and sharing my experience with others, just as others shared with me. So that to me is everything.
That's pretty good. That's a good way to go about life and good about kind of helping that next generation.
I hope so.
Forward. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, President Ward, thank you so much for joining us in the BizCast, and we're looking forward to, working with University of Hartford, seeing where these partnerships grow and how the university kind of evolves over the next few years. Thanks so much for joining the BizCast.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Cheers.
And thank you for listening to this week's BizCast. You can listen, like, and subscribe to our podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Please leave us a review. Let us know if you have ideas for a future podcast. And for more episodes, head over to CBIA.com.